Good evening, everybody, and how are we all doing? Today is Sunday, the 11th of August, 2024. What a hot day! What an absolutely hot day. It's been lovely, though, to get a nice bit of warmth, just getting the weather going. Now, we are live on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and if you are watching in the Facebook group as well, we may not see your comment, but we are live there as well. A little bit quiet tonight, but let's see if anybody is actually out there. Over on Instagram, Geraldine Foley, the Kentish Gardener, and Brickley Clare, have joined. Welcome along. Please do feel free to join in the conversation. What have we got over here? Billy SBB is saying hello, everyone. Good evening to you. Kate Sprat is there. Good evening, Veg Army. Good evening to you. Turbo Stream, good evening, Veg Podcasters. Good evening to you. Allotted Chef, aka Nathan, is there saying evening all. Good evening to you. Anna Jones, good evening, Gardeners. Good evening to you. And Stuart Jackson, evening, Richard and the Veg Army. Sorry I missed last week. I was on holiday on the Isle of Wight again. Great gardens visited. I might be going to the Isle of Wight soon. I might be going to the Isle of Wight very soon for a bit of a trip. Digwell, phew, made it. Just finished publishing a video. We had trouble last week with your video, didn't we? Uploading it. Hopefully that has been sorted now. Over on Instagram, the Kentish Gardener says, I'm out in the garden, leveling sleepers. Fantastic, fantastic. That must be hard work out in the heat that we have today. I don't know what it's like wherever you might be in the world, but here it is absolutely roasting. I've been sweating buckets. Nigel was joined. Good evening all. Welcome to summer part 2. Yeah, this is the real summer, as it should be called. It's been roasting. Richard Golding, hello all. Good evening to you. And Turbo Stream, 27 degrees C here in the Shire. That's boiling, is it? That's just boiling. So what we're going to be talking about today, the question that I'm asking you is, can you or do you produce enough compost? This is quite a topical question. It's something that I have been given a lot of thought to over this last year, because compost can be quite expensive. I've worked out if I was to buy enough compost for my garden, we'll be needing to spend about £500 on compost alone this year. And then if we were to do the same down on the allotment, we're looking about £1,200. That's a lot of money. That is a lot of money, and it's money I can't really spend. So instead, I've always tried to make enough of my own compost. But I think the first question I need to ask everybody, can you produce enough of your own compost to fill your gardening needs? Can you produce enough compost for your gardening needs? So quickly over on Instagram, Kentish Gardener says 28 degrees. It's a tad challenging digging into dry clay. I don't envy you. I do not envy you. Dry clay on a hot sunny day. Not easy, is it? Not easy at all. Jenny Red in the Garden has also joined over on Instagram. Digwell says BT sent him a new smart hub after the trouble he had last week. I can understand that. Turbo Stream, too warm for gardening for me, so I had a relaxing day. You know what? I sort of did the same. Did do a little bit of gardening, but I think it's important to look after ourselves. And if it's hot as it has been, you've got to take time out and just drink plenty of cold drinks or sit in the garden sunbathing. I will be drinking quite a bit tonight, I'm afraid, because I need to keep hydrated. It's super hot here in Nottingham. What is super hot? What do people find to be too hot? This is just a slight question I'm going to throw out there. Digwell says no, and I think that's to no, not being able to produce enough compost. I think that's going to be a lot of people's answer. Andy Jones says, in a normal year, if I compost everything possible, it covers about a third of our garden in mulch. Crikey, so if you compost everything, you only get about a third of what you really need. Yeah, it says a lot, doesn't it? Digler says, I might have to put my summer duvet on tonight. It is a tad warm. It is a tad warm. Jenny says, hello, sorry I'm late, and 23 super hot for me. It is warm. It is warm. We were getting 27 degrees here on the coast. We drove along the seafront and got ourselves an ice cream earlier because, well, we needed ice cream. But yes, so coming back to the compost, do you produce enough compost for your needs? Now, over the years, I've worked out that here at home, I can just about produce enough compost. But there's a key to that secret, and I'll get into that in a moment. But on the allotment, there's no way I can produce enough compost, despite having several large compost bins, composting absolutely anything possible, trying to make as much compost as I possibly can. The allotment is just impossible. It's too big an area. We need too much compost. So, what is it about what I do at home that gives me enough compost? Now, my garden and my allotment are of a similar size. Admittedly, my allotment is more for growing food. My garden is purely for growing food as well, but we've got sheds and other things. And so it's not quite as much growing space, I guess we could say. So, what do I do at home that I think sets it apart? What is it at home that is the reason that I think we are able to produce enough compost? To me, it's one thing, the chickens. Now, I try and clean my chickens out on a weekly basis, but when I clean the chickens out, we have, of course, all the chicken manure that comes out. We have the wood shavings that I pop down to soak up all the wet moisture. We've got straw in there as well. That all goes in the compost bin on a weekly basis, along with grass clippings and all our weeds. And I think that has been the key thing as to why I've been able to produce enough compost for here at home. Now, at home, I've got 4 Dalek compost bins, which I absolutely hate the look of. I want to make some nicer looking compost bins at some point. We've also got a wormery, which all our kitchen waste goes in. And then we also have a sub pod, which is an underground composting system. So compared to the allotment, we don't have as many compost bins here at home, but somehow I'm able to produce enough compost. Now, I do think it's important to differentiate. There's a difference between compost and the multi-purpose compost or potting soil that we might buy from a garden centre to use. There's a big difference between the two. So I'll come back to that in a minute. Over on Instagram, Jenny says, I won 2 tons of compost and I've run out already. And Coffee and Flower Gardens has joined as well. It doesn't take much to run out of compost, does it? 2 tons, which are the two big bags worth, basically, 2 of the builders' bags, basically. Doesn't take long to go through all that at all. Where have we got? Where were we? Turbo Stream says, anything above 22 degrees C is too hot for me. More of a spring autumn garden. I'm with you. It gets hot and I just sweat and I'm uncomfortable. So I'm with you. I'm with you on that. Kate says, I won't be able to produce enough compost. I need to add 2 more raised beds, and that's going to take a fair bit. Is that to get it started or in general use? Because what I do to get a compost bin started is put some twigs and logs in the bottom and then put compost on top of that to fill it up. It does actually work quite well. Turbo Stream says, I produced enough for a top layer on the allotment if you include the leaf mold. Yeah, I want to find all this out. If we include leaf mold, fantastic. I buy compost for raising seeds as it's sterile. I'd agree with that. Compost for seedlings, I totally agree with that. But yeah, leaf mold. I mean, it's a form of composting. If that's the key to it, that's what we want to hear because we need to hear all these things. Nigel says, I have 2 wheelie worm bins. That is enough to make my seed sowing compost. I have around 3 to 4 cubic meter of compost bays that I fill with cow manure and let it rot down for 12 to 18 months. And he goes on to say, cow manure is £30 for approximately 6 tons delivered. I need to know where your cow manure comes from because I really do need to get some manure. On our allotment, we used to get horse manure delivered quite regularly. We used to have to pay a £5 a year to get access to it, but it was delivered and I would go along and take it and put it in my compost bins. Unfortunately, they say it's got too expensive to get that compost, that horse manure delivered anymore. So I have been searching on Facebook Marketplace to get some more manure. ideally for free, because the cheaper we can get it, the better. But I would also like to get my hands on a good supply of cow manure and see how that goes. Rob's Allotment Gardening has joined. Good evening, all. Good evening to you. Turbo Extreme says, gutted that the leaves aren't getting dropped off to our allotments. Although the chairman is having talks with the trust to try and get a solution. Indeed, indeed. And yeah, I mean, again, we do get on our allotment, we do get wood chips delivered, which can be used for composting, of course, and for mulch. So it kind of makes up for it, but it's just not the same as horse manure or any sort of manure. I think manure is something as vegetable gardeners we need to get plenty of. Anna Jane says, this year I've composted much less than normal as the garden has had so many scabs, leaf spots, and rotting plants due to the wet weather. I agree. I've been a bit scared of spreading disease around. Yeah, you might have a point there, because we're definitely composting less this year through various reasons. And also plants just haven't thrived as much this year as they would normally do. And that's going to reduce the amount of compost that we get. What I'm sort of now, and you'll hear this on tomorrow's podcast, my attitude now is that we're turning our attention into prepping for next year. So I'm starting to, any beds that are empty, I'm mulching with compost, going to say green manures. Basically, I'm starting to prep for next year is my attitude, because it's been such a bad year. I want to get next year much better. And we need a lot more compost. That's becoming apparent. What else have we got? Stuart Jackson says, I only have 2 compost bins, which I have only ever used on the beds. But next year, I want to mix it with potting compost and use it for potting up. Yeah, so something that I've been doing a lot this year, and that's actually worked out quite well. So I've been growing, I grow most of my plants from seeds, and I pot them into pots. I prick them out, but sometimes you get some compost left in the pots that either seeds haven't germinated or the plants themselves have died in, which is a common thing. I have actually been taking that leftover compost and putting it into a separate bin to make sure there's no leftover seeds that are going to germinate. And that compost, I mean, that bin filled up quite quickly. That compost is then going to be used as a mulch. So that's been something I've taken away this year, is that actually holding on to and saving some of that leftover compost that you would normally throw away adds an extra compost source. Cow manure is free around here, says Stuart Jackson. The farmer is happy for us to pick it up and bag it ourselves. Lucky you. Lucky you. Toby Stream, I noted my Dalek bin I filled with leaves and producing some nice leaf mold. So hopefully that will work for seedlings. I think leaf mold, if we can get more leaf mold or anything like that, well, I think that's going to be the key to being able to produce enough compost as well. Toby Stream says we can order a ton of manure, but at £50 a ton, it's very expensive. That's cheap. That's cheap, I would say, depending on if it's well rotted or not, I guess. Digger says, some good news on our compost bin front. The site has finally realised that the massive 4-bay system is not working, so they are thinking of allowing us to have our own at last. I personally think every allotment should be allowed to have a compost bin. It's obviously it's good for the environment, it reduces waste, and every garden should be composted, in my opinion, as well. We throw so little waste out that it's quite amazing, really. Tapestry, my big bay compost bay is overflowing with weeds, cuttings, etc. I'm on a mission to make as much compost for top dressing on the allotment. Yeah, excellent. So you're basically composting as much as you possible, and overfilling, that's fine. I'll sooner have overfilling compost bins because they soon compact down. GK, hi everyone. I'm listening but doing chores at the same time. I probably need to put more effort into my allotment compost making. Indeed, indeed. Nigel, worm casts are excellent for using as seed compost. I just add some sharp sand. The biggest challenge is drying it out. Yes, I agree with that. Worm castings is a fantastic resource. So many good things that we can do with it. And just thinking about using it for seed compost, I'm going to give it a try. Over on Instagram, Jenny says I had 2 tons of topsoil, so 4 tons gobbled up all at once. Doesn't surprise me. 4 tons sounds like a lot, but it doesn't go very far. I'm growing a lot of green manure, partly to please the rule makers and to sort the soil and to start making compost material. Green manure, good thing. And she goes on, I'm not having compost bins, piles, I'm chopping and dropping only, mainly for mobility reasons. Again, chop and drop is something I've been learning a bit about. So the general understanding that I'm getting from you guys is that trying to make enough compost can be a bit of a challenge. And what do we think is the makes it so difficult? Is it just purely getting enough compost material or having enough compost bins? So when it comes to compost bins, what I try and do is I'll fill up one bin, and once that's filled up, I'll move on to the next one. But once that bin has rotted down, I will try and combine them together to try and free up some more compost bins while making more, so I can make more compost, but also continuing on with the compost material being needed and used. It doesn't always go to plan because compost isn't always ready at the same time or when you need it. And what I really want to do is get it so I have a supply of compost that is ready to use at all times, rather than trying to build up the compost the compost material and then have it ready when I don't need it. But getting compost material is the next challenge I think many of us have. And Turbo Extreme has sort of said about using what were they, leaves that get delivered to his allotment in the autumn, which I think great idea. Trying to use as much compost material from wherever it comes from is, I think, going to be the key. So of course we'll compost everything that we produce on our allotments or our gardens, our kitchen waste. But I also, down on the allotment, I'm thinking if I can get a supply of horse manure or cow manure, that would go a long way. I might have a word with my neighbour. My neighbour's a professional gardener. He has a lot of prunings and grass clippings and things like that. I might be able to ask him to throw it in a bucket for me, and I'll take that down to the allotment to try and build up more compost material, provided, of course, it's weed killer free and fertilizer and pesticide free, of course. That's definitely one thing I think of producing more compost is just getting hold of more material, making friends with our allotment neighbours, our gardeners, our local gardeners, tree surgeons for wood chips is going to be a good one. The council for leaf mould is also a good one. Any other ideas like that? Turbo Stream says it's already sunk a couple of times. The other bay needs emptying, so I can feel that one too. I've got an idea about that as well. The problem with compost is you need 4 times the material that you end up with. Unless you can generate the material, then you will always be short. It's true. It's very true. That's one of the things that I grow comfrey for, because it's a great compost material, but also green manures that can also be turned into compost material too. Trying to build as much compost material is certainly a challenge. I've read all those over on Instagram. Brian's Garden Polytunnel says, hi all, good evening to you. Nigel says, green-brown ratio mix can be critical in how fast it is composting. I agree. Yeah. And this is one of the other troubles. I always find, again, this is the great thing of having chickens, because our green-brown ratio mix is more or less even each week. But on the allotment, I find we go through periods where we just get so much green material, and then we go through periods where we get a lot of brown material. Now, brown material is slightly easier to keep free until you need it. But when it comes to the green material, excuse me, my nose is itchy, trying to get the green material at the same time as the brown material is always a challenge, isn't it? And I don't know how anybody goes about that. If anybody's got any tips, then please do suggest that. Beto says, not used any of my compost for 3 years now. I'm going to use a no-dig bed after clearing it. I'll need plenty of it. It'd be well rotted after 3 years, I can tell you that. Very well rotted. So you have some fantastic compost. The longer you can leave compost to rot down, the better it is generally, isn't it? What else have we got? Tammy Stream says, I take all my garden waste to the allotment from my home garden. That's a good idea. If you can do that, We're not allowed to on the allotment technically, but I don't know if they would necessarily know. But again, I want to produce compost at home, so we don't technically take anything down to the allotment. But I come back to the fact that I might ask my neighbour, a professional gardener, landscape gardener. He often has his pickup truck full of compostable materials, and see if we can get him to take it to the allotment for me and throw it in my compost bins. That might work out as a better way of getting more compost material. Stuart Jackson says, what does everyone else do with weeds? Do you put them all in the compost bin, or is there any things that are okay to go in or not go in? So what does everybody do with weeds and composting? Personally, I throw all my compost or my material in the compost bin. I try not to let them flower, so there's no risk of weed seeds. And I generally find that if the compost bin is well maintained and it gets hot, it's going to kill off any roots anyway. The difficulty is, of course, getting the compost bin hot enough to kill anything off. And one of the worst problems I have on the allotment is, of course, the couch grass. But generally, when I remove all my compost out to spread, there's not any couch grass roots left in it. So I feel it is getting pretty hot enough to kill off any weeds. That's me personally, but what does anybody else say? Rob says all our tree surgeons around our way are selling chippings for biofuel. Yeah, they try and make money anywhere these days, don't they? I don't blame them, in all honesty. All my weeds go in the compost bin. Stuart says Turbo Stream. Digwell says just add loads of cardboard if you have too much green. Yeah. Again, this is something else I try and use a lot of. I get a lot of cardboard at work. Parts and things come packaged in so much cardboard. In it, I try and take it down the allotment, add it to compost bins, and of course for covering over some beds as a mulch as well. Cardboard. If you can collect as much cardboard as possible, then all well and good. Digwell says our council does not allow home waste to go to the plots, the same as ours technically. How would they know? I don't put perennial roots in the bin like dandelions and things like that. Again, it's not a bad idea. If you are worried about it, there's two things you can do. Leave it out in the sun to kill it off, or put it in a bucket of water to also kill it off. It might take a while, but that's another option you could do if you don't send anything to council tip like us. Mayor's Tower and Bindweed put in the council bin to help stop up the green compost waste. Yeah. If we didn't put anything in the council bin, then how would they make green compost waste? Has anybody used green compost waste from the green compost waste from the council, and what has been your results of using it? Instagram, let's have a quick check. Jenny says, I'm not going to try and make enough compost. I won't manage it and can't move it. But I'm aiming to improve the soil with chop and dropping. I will chop weeds, blight, foliage, etc. Everything goes. So it basically rots down where it is. A lot of people do talk quite well or quite highly about chop and drop. And it kind of makes sense because it's going to rot down where it's been extracted from and add all those nutrients in that area. It's not something I've done too much work with, to be honest. It's something I should look into more. Chili Cake says, we have a lot of couch grass and bindweed, so we take these and dandelions home for the council green waste. Other things go in the compost bin. So again, this is coming back to the perennial weeds. So they don't. Chili Cake doesn't put them in the compost bin, but they go to the council green waste. I mean, the council green waste gets hot enough that they will die off, so it's a good thing, of course. I can never get a hot compost pile, so it takes as long as it takes. The key to a hot compost pile, several things. You need obviously equal parts of green waste and brown waste, but also if it's chopped up small, it rots down and gets hotter as well. I used to chop or run over everything with my lawnmower. I do that bit more at home, and that just produced a fantastic compost material because it was chopped up small, it rotted down quick, and it got hot as well. Digger, same here. The stuff we get for the plots is third rate with loads of conifer leaves. What have I missed there? Oh yeah, talking about the tree surgeons. My garden has bindweed, so I leave it to dry before adding to the compost bin. Yeah, that's one way to do it. Absolutely. I leave it to dry in the sun just to kill it off so it doesn't come back. It's a good idea. Stuart says, just a reminder to like, share, etc. Yeah, please do give us a like, thumbs up, and follow, subscribe, and all that jazz. And share it. Please do feel free to share it. More people that know about it, the better the show gets. Digwa says, how would they know? People watching you take bags of rubbish out of your boot. Yeah, but if you put it into old bags of compost, how would they know? How would they know? You're right. I mean, you are right. I shouldn't be encouraging any law breaking, of course. I'm just basing it on my allotment. How would they know if I started getting the neighbours' waste material there as well? What have we got? Turbo Stream. I'm not aware of Birmingham Council selling the compost as green waste. Many councils they do sell the green waste compost, but I think it's getting harder and harder now because as peat has been phased out, more and more people are trying to get green waste to produce their own compost. So it may become a thing of the past. Our council green waste goes to a big plant in Swindon for processing. £4.95 for a 40-litre bag. No, thank you. That's expensive, isn't it? That is quite expensive. Stuart says, I have to use the compost from a local tip, but it has a bit of glass and stones, etc. So I don't use it anymore. This is a constant problem with any compost that we might buy in. Anne says, keep one bin solely for bad weeds. They don't go in the general compost bin. So one bin for the things like the couch grass and the dandelions, the perennial weeds. They all go in there and rot down. And I guess because if it's all in the same bin, you're not going to be using it so much. That's not a bad idea, is it? That's not a bad idea at all. Brian says, if we can't trust getting value for money with brought compost, how do we trust the council? We don't. We don't trust the councils, do we? Don't trust any government thing, to be honest. A few years ago, Dan from Allotment Diaries had some green compost waste analysed. Cyanide plus quite a few other natives were quite high percentage. This is a risk. This is a risk. And this is why I don't like green waste compost from likes of the council, because you don't know what has gone into it. But that could be the same as any multi-purpose compost we might buy as well. So there's a lot of things that could be open to that. What else have we got? I have no way of chopping up my allotment waste, so it goes on the pile as is. Lawnmowers were how I used to do it, but it did really work our lawnmower quite hard. Digwell says, I keep my home and plot waste separate. No point in transporting disease from one to the other. I do agree with that. I do agree with that. Again, I do very much the same sort of thing. And everything on the allotment, that like the tops of garlics and onions, they get taken down, they get cut down on the allotment and left on the allotment to be composted on the allotment. Oh, I think I'm going to go through a lot of liquids tonight. Birmingham has gone bust, so probably paying to take it to landfill. Yeah. Stuart Jackson says, our green waste, £4 per bag or £2 if you use your own bags. It's okay for chopping up the beds, that's all. Again, we've got to be quite clear that when it comes to things like green waste compost that we produce at home as well, it's not really for a growing media. It's not the type of stuff you would necessarily put in pots and stuff to grow in. Really, that wants to be a more loam-based compost anyway. The compost that we're talking about that we produce ourselves, this is more for soil improving, I guess I would say. You can still grow in it in the beds, of course, but it's not what I would call great. It hasn't got any soil necessarily added to it, and that's where we've got to be careful when it comes to buying in compost. Easy option, stick with peat-based compost where you can. Nigel says, most of our council waste is used by the Parks Department. Yeah, quite rightly in some ways, because that makes sense. But yeah, they will use it a lot too. Towboat Stream says, I don't have a cordless lawnmower and we'll be paying to take one down as it's a fair walk to my plot as we can't park by the plots. Yeah, I know. I'm being quite simplistic when I said I used a lawnmower. Not everybody can do that. What we got over on Instagram, Jenny says, I think it would be cheaper if you buy compost to get together with other plot holders and buy a ton bag. Country Lad Grows has also joined. Now, you're right. It would be cheaper to go in and buy compost together. But a ton bag of compost, that's normally about 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. Well, my beds are 3.6 meters squared and they're about 20 centimeters tall. So that 1 meter by 1 ton bag, these are my beds here at home, would fill about 1.5 beds. That's not very many. Not very many. Now, you sent me some homework, some challenge to actually go and find some compost that we could use. And I've been searching around in lots of places to try and find compost for sale. And I can get it delivered. We're looking at about £120 for a ton bag delivered, depending on where we get it from. Some of the better companies are a bit more expensive. We've got a local one down the road, actually, that doesn't have prices lifted. You have to inquire about it. And it's who my neighbour uses, so I'm going to ask him about it. But, yeah, there is a slight... as I said, if I was to buy in compost to fill in my beds here at home, we're looking probably around £400 or £500. Down on the allotment, £1,200 because I've got many more beds. It's just not financially viable, and this is why I want to build as much compost as I possibly can. Digwell says the peat bin ban is not happening now. I know it was being stalled. I didn't know it was definitely cancelled. Interesting indeed. Turbo Stream says, I would just spread what compost I make on top of a soil and possibly fork it in this year to top up the few inches. Absolutely. It's all we can do is just use what we have and see what happens. Jenny asks over on Instagram, does anyone use the trench method? I do, and also failed seedlings, etc. What is a trench method? Is that where you dig a trench, you fill it up with compost material, and then you cover it back over and then leave it to see what happens? Let me know. Let me know if that's what you're talking about, because actually I could do that this year as a way of filling up some of my beds that are going to be for beans next year. Fill it up with waste material, and you got me thinking there. Thank you, Jenny. Got me thinking, building like a bean trench. Right. I tell you what, let's what should we do? What should we do? What should we do? I kind of already alluded to the challenge, actually, and the challenge was to go and find the cheapest place to get compost. I did a lot of searching. I didn't make a video or anything, but the cheapest place it seemed to be was about £120 for a ton, which I worked out. If anybody goes to the range, they sell their own type of compost. Now, this is, when you read it, it's not a multi-purpose compost. It is more of a soil improver. And they sell 4 bags. They're 50-litre bags. Or they're 40-litre bags, sorry. You can buy 4 bags for £10. And I worked out for 120 litres, it would be £120. So we're not really saving anything, except we don't have to have a huge bag. We can just buy them bit by bit. To me, that seems to be the cheapest place to get compost from. It's not... The quality does seem fairly constant, but I wouldn't describe it as being the best compost by far. It's a very black, very sticky compost. Nigel says anything can happen with the new government. Indeed, it can. Turbo Stream says, not sure that my soil has benefited from full no dig as it's very firm. Give it time. It does take a long time and a lot of compost to really feel the benefits of no dig, because you've got to constantly allow the worms and everything to take that compost into the ground and really incorporate it for it to really come through. Rob says, my dad always uses the trench method. He would dig a row, then pop manure in it, then cover with the next spit. So there you go. That's somebody who somebody there, the trench method that worked there. Double digging, a great way to get humus into the soil. Yeah. This is why worms and stuff are doing it. They're getting that humus, however it's pronounced, into that soil, getting organic matter into the soil. P-Ban may not be cancelled per se, but it did not get its second reading in Parliament, so will not happen this year. But the Haughty press is reporting that many MPs are now realising they may have been, I think there's something else. Dad loved it, especially for the beans, talking about the trench method. Jenny says, yes, that's it. Yeah, the trench method. Basically, you dig a trench, fill it up with material, kitchen waste, and then cover over with soil, and you grow into that. I'm just thinking that I might do that down on the allotment with my beans. I'm not going to dig, of course. I'm just going to cover it over with compost material, then compost on top. Might actually work it out. Might actually fill up my beds quite quickly doing that. Digwell carries on with what he was saying. MPs are now realising that they may have been greenwashed and will shall object at the next reading, which will lead to a proper scientific survey. I do think a proper scientific survey does need to happen. I do think there's so much misinformation on a wide variety of things. Proper scientific surveys are important. Puckamuck is the best in Sussex. I've not heard Puckamuck. Where are they based and how much do they charge? And what do you get? Hi, Richard. Sorry I'm late, says Nicola. Welcome along, Nicola. Hope you are well. Turbo String, my plot has cracks so big that my fingers can fit down the cracks. You're quite unlucky then. Normally, I do get cracks like that in my soil, especially on the allotment. We're not getting it this year. Maybe because it's been so damp, but also because our compost... We have been composting quite well this year, so it may be working in that sense with no dig. But our soil is pretty moist. Rob says another name for it is bastard digging, talking about the trench digging. Kate says, I put a slit of compost material in the bottom of my first raised bed to bulk it out, then topped up with normal compost. Absolutely. Trouble is, it can get expensive, doesn't it? Normal compost, a 50-litre bag of normal compost doesn't go very far, and especially these days. Thinking that if I lightly fork the compost on the top 6 inches, it will incorporate better. Give it a try. Give it a try. Digras says Belarus have just reported that it has mined its first 1 million tonnes of peat. And interesting indeed. So I tell you what, what's the time? I think it's time to go to a video, and it's the sow along for this week, which is chili seeds. Well, it's time for this week's sow along, and this week we are sowing a chili seed. Now, I'm actually sowing these chili seeds in my agrarian plug plant starter, which I'm a big fan of. I know many of you have them as well. I filled it up with seed sowing compost, and I'm just using the lid to make the holes in which I'll dib a hole into which we're going to drop the seeds. We're going about 1 centimetre deep for these. Now, the seeds themselves, I've gone for a very hot chili. I find chilies, as you can see, these are the seeds right here, fairly small. I find chilies need a very long growing season, particularly the hot varieties of chilies. So I do find that we start chili seeds off quite a bit earlier than most other people. But what we're doing with these particular seeds, it is August, which is very early to sow chili seeds. We are going to overwinter these chili plants. Now, it's not uncommon to overwinter chili plants that you may already have. We do this a lot. We keep our chilies, we cut them or trim them to get them through the winter, keep them inside a greenhouse. I've even left them outside some years, and they have continued to grow back the following year and produce an early crop of chilies. And particularly with the hot chilies that need a long growing season, this can be quite good. So what we're going to do with these chili seeds is we're sowing them now. We're going to get these to germinate, which shouldn't take too long. we're going to try and get them as large as we can get them before winter sets in. And then as long as we keep them somewhere fairly protected, they should continue to grow throughout the winter. They may slow down, but then they will give us an earlier crop next year. They will spring into life a little bit earlier, turn to flower, and give us plenty of chilies. That's the idea, as I'm sure you can gather. Now, the seeds that I'm actually sowing here today are a variety called Roxy, which is quite a hot variety, should do quite well. But you can use any chili seed variety you have, but I would emphasize that you really want to save this for the very hot varieties. Very hot varieties are going to do this best. Now, once we've sown these will go in the heated propagator until germination, where we'll continue to grow them under grow lights. We'll get them into pots once the roots come out the bottom, and just treat them like ordinary chili plants. Just bring them in the greenhouse over winter, or on a kitchen worktop or something like that. Come March, they will go back out into the greenhouse, where they should continue to grow. And then come May, they can go outside. As I said, I have left them outside before, so that is certainly an option as well. But I have got quite mild weather here. And then once they are into growing season, we feed them with a tomato feed once they start to flower. Really quite easy to grow chilies. One of my favourites, as I'm sure you are aware. Now, last week we sowed some swede, and the swede has actually germinated and looks like it is growing rather well. It's still very early days, so we will worry about that another day. I forgot to do the chicory from the week before, but we have sown some red mustard, as you can see, is now up and growing quite well. And added to that, a few weeks ago, we also sowed some spinach. And at the time, Digwell warned that it may bolt. And as you can see here, it has bolted. Certainly was the wrong time to sow spinach. But we can still sow spinach now if that is something you're interested in. Just remember to keep it somewhere in the shade. Right, well, that has got all the chili seeds now sown. We're just going to tamp them down, add a bit of compost, and then place them in our heated propagator. And I will report back in the future to see how they get on. For now, back to the studio. Indeed, back to the studio. Here we are. I made a mistake. I said swede seeds that we sowed last week. It wasn't. It was cauliflower seeds that we sowed last week, which have all germinated, or most of them have germinated and off to a fairly decent start. But this is your chance now to also share any tips on how to grow chilies. Nigel says, soak chili seeds in cold tea. Allegedly improves germination. I've not heard of that one, but excuse me, I will take your word on that, and we'll have to try that out one day. Just quickly over on Instagram, Jenny has made something that I wanted to mention as well when it comes to making enough compost. Jenny says, I love using bales, and Digwell has had amazing success with it. There was a lot of compost material I spread them out in my old garden, and it was wonderful in the next spring. So last year I tried doing straw bale gardening. It didn't work for me. But I think I know where I went wrong. But one of the things that I wanted to do with it, by doing or growing in straw bales, I was hoping that the straw bales would rot down, produce a decent compost, and help improve the amount of compost that we actually have. And I think it would work. I do think it would work because it does rot down and it can produce a type of compost. Digwell, of course, as we know, has been doing it this year, and it looks like it's going to work. So that might be another way of trying to get a bit more compost out of it by doing straw bale gardening and using the straw bales to produce compost at the end. What do you think on that? What do you think on that? Where were we? So Turbo Stream says, it's actually been very dry the last couple of months here. We bake in the summer and drown in the winter. Nigel says, need to get some humus or organic matter in there to retain the moisture. Also give it a very good watering. Yeah. Definitely get organic matter. It'll hold on to that moisture a lot better, and it means we avoid the cracks. And it does work. It does work. It's just getting enough organic matter, compost, to make it worthwhile. Rob says, I used to get my compost and other stuff from Wix, free roadside delivery, over £70. I think even when I compared the price of Wix stuff, it was working out the same sort of price. Although Richard Golden has said that other place that he mentioned, 850 litres was £74. So that's something to look at, isn't it? I need to break up the soil more, I think. I think you just need to get more organic matter going, including your leaf mould. Diggrass says, my new plot has been worked as a traditional plot, albeit really poorly. It looks like the Sahara Plains, load of organic stuff needed. Yeah, just got to try and get hold of plenty of organic matter, haven't we, to try and do it. I've read that one. Stuart Jackson says, is anyone else found that salad leaves are bolting after being away? I came back to half of mine bolting. Thanks, team. They are bolting at the moment a bit too quickly, but I don't mind that too much because that's food for the chickens, and we always have plenty more. This is where we sow salad leaves in the summer every 2-3 weeks, because as soon as it bolts, we get more coming along. We do eat a lot of salad leaves, as you know, but yeah, they are bolting in the middle of summer. If the bales do not last another year, then I will have 10 bales worth of mulch. Yeah, I mean, that was the idea I found with straw bale gardening, is that it was going to produce more compost or mulch. We did use the straw as mulch, admittedly, but then we had problems with slugs and snails, so it all went in the compost bin. And actually, it's rotted down quite nicely, so it may have worked. Problem with most compost delivery companies is they use pallet delivery. No good for allotments. I need one with a HIAB. HIAB? I need one with a HIAB. This is the trouble. Even like we could get compost delivered to our house in a big dumpy bag, but then that's out the front, which is in the way of our cars, our garage. Wherever we leave it out the front, it's going to be in the way. So I've got to move it out the back. And if our beds aren't empty, we need somewhere to store it. I mean, we would have to time it for when our beds are empty to make it worthwhile. And this is one of the problems with buying in compost on such huge quantities. I'm very lucky to produce compost from land, but wonder how much arsenic is in it. I think I just have to worry too much. You have high levels of arsenic, Nicola down in Cornwall, high levels of arsenic. So I do think I don't know, but you're growing in raised beds. This stuff in raised beds should be okay. Plus your poultry manure and stuff should help produce more compost. The real question is, can you produce enough compost? That's it. Stream, there's been plenty of compost added since I took the plot on. It needs incorporating a bit more, I think. Not going to double dig, just fork it in a bit more. Yeah, it'll get there. It will get there on its own. My beds, I fill my beds right up, and they pretty soon go right back down to soil level because it all gets absorbed into the soil. My lettuce are grown in pots in a polytunnel, watered daily, and no bolting or trouble with slugs. Yeah, watering daily, keeping that soil cool is the key there, isn't it? With it. HIAB, crane on the lorry. So that's what I thought you meant. Country Lad Grows. Have you tried the Woodhorn group near Chichester for compost? I've not tried them myself. No, I have. Again, I was looking at their prices and things to try and work out if it was worthwhile. It's the price of compost is what's put me off, but that's because I can be quite a stingy git and don't really want to spend money unless I have to. But they had quite good reviews when I checked them out, so it's definitely an option. I can't remember their prices, if they had their prices on the website. Turbo Stream, when it does rain, my soil looks really nice. The top layer dries out very quickly. Well, that's a clay soil for you. I'm pretty sure you're on a clay soil. Clay soil does dry out on the top layer very quickly, and it almost caps over. Again, once you've built up the organic matter levels, it becomes less of a problem. And that's what we found with my soil, is that now we've built up the compost layers and mulched as well with a decent mulch, it does tend to stay pretty decent. I mean, you all know my thoughts on mulching. I've always said mulching is probably one of the biggest and most important things we can do as gardeners, because it just saves so much work. mulch, your green compost is the best. Grass clippings, if need be. Straw, I'm not a fan of straw, but that's because of slugs and snails. Leaf mold, anything like that that you can mulch with, use it, and it'll hold on a lot better. Nigel says most drop-offs will require transport after drop-off. I have a 200-meter round trip for each wheelbarrow load. Clocks up a few mile while shifting 6 ton. This is the trouble, isn't it? If you can't get it delivered or right where you need it, you've then got to put a lot of work in to trying to move all this compost to where you need it. And it's the same when we produce our own compost. I mean, a lot of people will say that no-dig gardening is a lazy form of gardening because you're not digging over the soil, which is kind of true. You're not digging over the soil, but when you're trying to transport loads of compost, that's actually quite hard work. Digging out the compost from the compost bin, moving it on a wheelbarrow to where you need it and transporting it is a lot of work, a lot of work. Rob says, I'm lucky. I rent space in a warehouse that has got a lot of forklifts, so I have my pallet loads delivered there and then take what I need and when. Fantastic, fantastic. Yeah, you are very lucky to have that option, aren't you? I mean, but this is where we all love, isn't it? We all have different aspects, different abilities, different ways of doing things, which are all suited to what we have. You know, I actually slightly off topic slightly. I met up with somebody yesterday. We've got a thing going on in Littlehampton and some of the local towns at the beginning of October. It's called a food fortnight, and it's to do with our community gardens. I met up with a community gardener yesterday because I'm trying to do some work with them for that food fortnight, they've got an apple day going on and things like that. It's going to be a lot of fun. I've got to say, it should be a lot of fun. Although they need a bit of they need a few ideas to really make a success of it. Because I've suggested a few ideas and they haven't even thought of some of the things. But the gardener. We had to walk around the community allotment on my allotment site, and then he came up and had a look at mine as well. And I can't remember where I was going with that. Oh, we were talking about compost because I've got quite a few compost bins. He can't have compost bins on the area he's at on our allotment side, but at the others he can. But it's not enough. Not enough to really produce what they want to do. Digwell says to Nigel, nowhere within half a mile for pallet offload. This is one of the big problems, isn't it? Stream, all we can do is make as much as we can and use it wisely. So that's a good point. That might be the next aspect where we take this conversation, using it wisely. How can we use our compost wisely? How can we use our compost wisely? For me, I think it's about when trying to get the compost available for when you need it, trying to produce as much as you can. But how can we use it wisely? One other thing I wanted to say, and I forgot to say this, is Charles Dowding's, what he talks about of the 3-bay method of composting. So you would have 3 bays, we'll call them 1, 2, and 3, with 1 and 3 being at the edge. And then what he would say is that he would start by filling compost bay 1. When that compost bay is full, he would then start to fill compost bay 3. When compost bay 3 is full, he would then turn all the compost from compost bay 1 into compost 2, and then start filling up compost bay 1 again. And then when that one's full, he would do the same with compost bay 3, turn it over into compost bay 2. And pretty much at that point, I think it'll be ready for use. Which again, that makes a lot of sense. It does make a lot of sense in trying to fill up lots of compost bins, as well as trying to produce good compost and get it mixed and aerated the correct way. I thought it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? No dig garden is the sensible way. It's easier on your back as someone who suffers with back trouble. There is no other way I could enjoy garden. But if you want to dig, go for it. It's again, it comes back to what I said earlier. Everybody has different methods and ways of doing things. Nobody's right and nobody's wrong. It's just we're all different. Nigel says, I got 20 bags via my allotment shop he had the nursery deliver it direct. The pallet came in on a big van with a powered lift on the back. He dropped it off at my drive. Fantastic, fantastic. It's great if you can get that, isn't it? If you can get it delivered and everything, it is fantastic. Nicholas says, I have a pile of wood chip from trees off land that needed to be felled. All but compost now after 2.5 years and horse manure, but horses eating grass, etc. So not sure how much there's tree grass taken up. At the end of the day, it's compost material that you're going to have to use. You just have to, you might get grass pop up, but just make the most of it. You've got it. Use it. You need it. Use it. Stuart says, I have found that my compost bins have dried out faster this year. Should I water it or not? Yes. If a compost bin is dry, it's not going to rot down. You need to add a bit of more moisture to it to keep it going. Just check over on Instagram. Nothing going on over there. And Brian says, have you seen the size of Charles Dowding's compost bays? A bit too big for the average allotment. He's got several. I think what his big main one, the one under shelter, is pretty big, but I don't see. I don't know. I think it's a 5 bay. I don't know how big each bay is, but if you are able to fill up enough compost bins, then it's got to be they're as big as they need to be. I mean, my big compost bin on my allotment is about 1.2 meters by 1.2 meters by about 1 meter high. So it's pretty big, but it does fill up quite quickly. And again, I don't have delivery of sheep manure or horse manure or anything like that. So Charles does. Again, at the end of the day, everybody does something different. Nickel is a similar size to Brian's. Pee in it, ammonia helps speed up the decomposing. That's very true, actually. That's very true. That's something I don't tell anybody this, but I do pee on my compost bin down on the allotment because it does help speed up the compost bin. That's what I do at home. Dropped off on my drive. They won't drop off to the plot because of gravel and grass. No road or hard standing. High up is okay. A few have them by me. Mine are 5 by 6, 4 in total. Is that 5 foot by 6 foot compost bins? I mean, I come back to what I said earlier, that the bigger the compost pile you can produce, the actual hotter it gets and the better compost material you can produce. This is one of the things that sets home composting apart from green waste composting, is that because they're so big and so much material, it gets hotter and can rot down faster and produce a decent compost. But not everybody has a space. Not everybody does have a space. I use lots of urea on my bales. Starts the composting off on it, doesn't it? It's going a method I didn't think we would go down now. Tony O'Neill has a load of compost bins on his plots. Keyword there, though, I think, again, I'm alluding a bit further back to what Brian says. Plots. If you've only got a half plot or a quarter plot, and having loads of compost bins are going to take up some of that valuable growing space. That being said, I do like to grow pumpkins and things like that in my compost bins. So it's not necessarily a wasted compost space, but yeah, again, it's something to think about. You won't want to use my pee, too much medication, says Brian. And Rob says, my pee is full of Stella. I wouldn't, if I could be, I would if I couldn't be seen by next door. Pee in a bottle in your toilet and then pour that bottle out into your compost bins. That's the way I would do it. Digma says, even a 50-50 green-brown mix, Charles Dowding must have a good source of brown stuff. I think he gets sheep manure delivered quite regularly, and that's the source of the brown material and stuff. I think that's the secret to it. Plus, I mean, let's not forget, we all know that, and he's never hidden it. Charles Dowding does buy in compost as well. So even he can't produce enough with those huge compost bins. And there's no shame in that. No shame in that at all. He has wood chips delivered too. There you go. you know, so we've been discussing about getting stuff delivered to improve the amount of compost bins that we have, and that certainly wood chip and stuff. I think that's the secret to it. The secret to getting it is we need to buy in some stuff. And my nose is really itchy this evening for some weird reason. Right, shall we have a look? I've got two sets of photos to go through tonight, actually. We'll go through the first one, which is your harvest photos, because a few of you have been harvesting quite a bit of food this week. And I think it's always good to show these photos off. So Nigel, he's looking very happy here with his cauliflower. As I think there's about 6 cauliflowers here, which look absolutely stunning, look delicious. We're very, very well done. Next, here he is with his peas. Again, a good collection of peas there. It must have taken ages to shell, but a good collection of peas. Well done indeed. Very, very well done. And his beans as well. I'm very jealous because we've not managed to grow any beans this year. So fantastic indeed there, Nigel. Good lot of beans. They're good size as well. Are they enorma or what variety are they? Now, Nathan has harvested his first sweet corn, which looks fantastic as well. Good 5 cobs there, which look brilliant and delicious and look like a good size too. Especially, it's pretty early for sweet corn, so I think that's even better. Well, I was early for this year, I should say. Digwell's harvested some potatoes. He did tell me what the varieties were, but I've forgotten. They look fantastic. This is his first load of potatoes. This is his second load of potatoes with that beautiful purple colouring. And then his onions as well, which all look fantastic too. I've been debating about actually getting my onions out the ground because they're still looking quite green, and I'm trying to work out if it's worthwhile. Scott's also harvested some onions. Again, my tops look quite green like this, so I'm leaving them in for a little bit longer. So that is it from the harvest photos. We'll go through the other photos in just a moment. Let's have a quick look. Check on Instagram. Nothing going on over there. Over here, though, what have we got? Where were we? Turbo Stream. Charles Downer gets in horse manure from stables, I think. Wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I know he's spoken about sheep manure, but, you know, it's all got to come in from somewhere. Nice collies, mate, says Rob. Stuart Jackson says a great cauliflower. Brilliant cauliflower harvest, wasn't it? Nigel says beans are Benchmaster. Fantastic Benchmaster. They looked fantastic, I've got to say. Turbo Stream says, I've done well with runner beans. Have given loads away this year. Lucky you. Lucky you. No runner beans at all this year here. Stuart Jackson says, my beans would not fill one hand, Nigel. I've had the same trouble this year. Well, they've just been non-existent. Digwell says, I'm struggling for straight runner beans this year. The show's next Saturday. Fingers crossed for you. Fingers crossed. Is that a local show or is it one of the big ones? Nigel says, 8 collies all at once. Some starting to blow, downside of growing F1. Yeah, especially in the summer, isn't it? The cauliflowers we sowed last week are going to be our winter cauliflowers, so should hopefully do quite well. Turbo Stream says, my sweet corn has been trashed by the badgers before any had matured. It's not unusual. Badgers do like some sweet corn. The potatoes were Casablanca, then Kestrel, both lots from one tuber in the straw bales. They look very clean as well, didn't they? Yeah. Nigel says, I get my horse manure from the horse. But I love it. Kate says, great harvests indeed. Brian says, I've only got 2 runner bean plants and the last 3 weeks have produced very well. I reckon next week I'll be freezing some. You lucky, Scott, is all I can say. Cobra is a variety. Lucky you. Lucky you is all I can say. Digwell, Slimbridge Gardening Club, a local one. Excellent. And Tarot Stream, LOL, Nigel. Indeed. Nothing going on over on Instagram. We've got quite a good views on Instagram tonight, so that's rather good. So, moving on. Anybody got anything they would want to add about this whole producing compost? Can you produce enough compost? Is there anybody out there that has produced enough compost, or do you think we can do it? Do you think it's possible to produce enough compost for your allotment or garden needs? Now, at this moment, I'd just like to remind everyone, please give us a like, please give us a thumbs up, please do give us a follow and a subscribe. And don't forget to click the notifications so that you know so you know when we go live. I'm actually told I need to tell you that more at the beginning, which I think we did earlier. The sooner we get more people liking, the algorithms work and send more people our way. So something to think about. I hate algorithms. Oh, lovely, lovely. Turbo Stream says the sweet corn looked really good too. Won't bother again on that site. You've got to try and block it off on the badgers, but it's easier said than done. Now, what have we got here actually? Rob just says I would never be able to make enough compost from my half pot. Yeah. I think we can do it at home, but that's purely because of the chickens, and we produce a lot of chicken waste effectively, which that for me has been the secret here at home. And perhaps I need to get chickens down on the allotment because we are allowed chickens on the allotment. That we could do a similar sort of thing with, and then use that material for compost waste. That might be a way to do it. Nicholas says, I could easily, as I have lots of land animal, birds making poo, bedding, cut meadow grass, bracken, etc., etc. So, yeah, Nicola is in one of those lucky positions where she's gone 3 acres of land, and not all of it is for growing food at the moment, as I understand it. But yeah, with all that land, all that material available, I mean, cutting the grass alone will give you plenty of material. So, something to think about there. Mark Shaw, last year I had 1 compost bin. This year I added to that and have 2, but I've kind of struggled with compost this year. Crops haven't grown very well this year. This is something we spoke of earlier, funny enough. There's been a lot of crops that are just not growing very well, so we're not getting enough material from it. This is why I'm moving more for like the comfrey down on the allotment is a great source of material. We cut that down. We've got quite a bit of comfrey, and that goes into the compost bin to help build our compost material. And I'm also going to be starting to use green manures as well, sowing green manures, which again, when we cut that down, that will go into the compost bin to produce more compost. So that's how we're going to be tackling it as a way around it. Nigel says to get enough compost volume, the footprint of the compost bays takes a huge chunk of your growing spaces. That is true, but you can always use your compost bays to grow things like pumpkins or courgettes and other squash plants in as well. So it does take a huge chunk of growing spaces, but if you think about it, you can still use it for growing other things. In fact, pumpkins and squashes thrive in a compost bin. They do really well in a compost bin. Stuart says, I find it very hard to make enough compost for my garden. I only have 2 bins. I would need at least double that. Yeah, I've got 4 bins and that does work, but it's the compost material, I think, that makes the difference. Turbo Stream says, I doubt I can provide enough compost for a no-dig plot. Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible if you get enough, if you can bring in enough material. Confession, we pile it all up, but don't turn enough. You know, turning is important. It helps produce a better compost. But I think some people get so worked up about turning it and everything. Actually, you can just pile it all up. It takes a bit longer to fully rot down, and it may not be as good quality compost, but it does work. I think you need at least 1/4 of an acre dedicated to veg growing to make enough compost to keep you going. Depends on how much compost you're trying to produce and everything, but I think you do need a lot of it. I agree. How much by volume do you need for the season? For me, I reckon about 8 cubic meters. That's a good place to start, actually. How much by volume? So here at home, I reckon we probably need about 4 or 5 cubic meters, give or take. I mean, I'm always adding more beds and growing and expanding, but yeah, 4 or 5 cubic meters. Down on the allotment, it is nearer 10 cubic meters that we need, um, which is a lot. Which is a lot. This is another one of the reasons that I like to have grass paths. Yes, I do have to mow the grass paths once a week, but that's compost material, and the more compost material I can get, the better it is for my liking. Graham says, evening, everyone. Late tonight. No worries. Hope you are well. Rob says, hi to Graham. I haven't seen the other Graham tonight. I'm a little worried about him, to be honest. Turbo Stream, I'm lucky my plot has 2 bays made from remains of a World War II Anderson shelter. I have a space, but not enough material. Well, this is a shame about when you used to get the leaf delivered, isn't it? You had all that leaf mold. But I reckon you can find the material. If you look hard enough, ask enough people, I reckon you'll be able to get enough material. Graham says, has anyone had a problem with courgettes this year? Half of mine are rotting on the end this year. It looks similar to blossom end roll, which normally seen on tomatoes. Yes, I'm having exactly the same problem. I've not harvested a single courgette this year. I've lost a lot of courgette plants for various reasons. When I do get courgettes, they seem to either drop off or rot away. It's just been a nightmare. And as I said, I've pretty much gone to the point now. It's the same with pumpkins for that matter, that I've given up, not given up for the year, but I'm turning my attention to trying to make it better for next year. Evening, Rob. Lovely weather for a Stella. Indeed, indeed. Let's have a quick check over on Instagram. Jen says, I'm thinking of growing sweet corn and as dividers hedging at the plot, not for the harvest, but for the compost material and temporary hedge while young hedge matures. View from Lake and Retro Rob 76 has also joined. Yeah, I mean, you could grow sweet corn as dividers. Obviously, it may not get very well pollinated. You might be better off looking at something like maize or something like that instead, if you just want it as a divider or a hedging. Something to sort of act as a filter. It's an idea. It's certainly an idea. Rob says it sure is. Got a couple by my side. Very low maturing, but the last few weeks I am picking every 3 to 4 days. Talking about courgettes, you were lucky sod. Mine have been, I've never known such a bad year as this. It is blossom end rot on courgettes, same as tomatoes, water management. So my tomatoes haven't had much blossom end rot, but courgettes, they have, and they're in the ground. So it's weird how it's happening for me. But hey, my courgettes seem to have done okay. I am now going to leave a few to grow on in tomatoes for the winter. Lucky you. I need some courgettes. It's also had the same trouble with marrows and squashes, but they've just started to grow. Thank goodness, says Anne. Yeah, I've got one pumpkin plant I'm holding on to, and I'm hoping another couple of courgette plants, holding on, hoping they will be successful. Fingers crossed. I'm running out of people to give courgettes to. Had so many. I'd love some. I would love some. We just not managed a single courgette this year. Sweet corn like sprout stalks take a bit longer to compost. Could do with putting them through a shredder. Didn't even talk about shredder, do we? Because I do have a shredder here at home that we shred a lot of our wood material. Roxy is also very good at that too. She shreds up a lot of our woody material. But yeah, sprout stalks and things like that go through a shredder to help chop up. Turbo Stream, I haven't really watered my courgettes this year. Water the courgettes something like CalMag to boost the calcium uptake, says Digwell. And Shell on Earth works too. Yeah, my courgettes just haven't grown. They're just tiny. It's been either that or the slugs and snails have got them. That's the two things that have gone wrong. Right, let's quickly look at your photos. There's only a short photos this week, because we had the harvest photos, of course. So what we got, Rob has sent me this picture of his flower baskets outside his house. I'm never very good at recognizing flowers. I want to say, are they pansies? let us know. Let us know. Now, Beddoes, he's attacked the ivy. There was a before and after picture in the Facebook group about this. Right, he's attacked his ivy, which, as everybody knows, ivy can be quite dominating. Plenty of compost material from ivy, though, but it can be quite dominating. Now, Chili Kate, she's been involved in a community, what I understand to be a community garden, and she's been helping set up this area today. So before, just this long strip of glass, and now it's gone in with some raised beds. I believe it's something to do with conserving water, but it's great to see. Now, Kate spent some time away, but while she was away, she was drawn to this vegetable garden, and I don't blame you at all. I do find myself, I'm very lucky in my job. Obviously, I get to visit hotels and things, and I'm always looking at the vegetable garden. I was at Amberley Castle the other day, and I was looking at the vegetable garden there. So don't blame you for that at all. And this looks absolutely stunning, doesn't it? I think vegetable gardens should be featured more in gardens because I think they can look really stunning. So please do keep sending your photos in. You can post them in our Facebook group. You can send to me via social media or email me, richard@veggroundpodcast.co.uk. That's richard@veggroundpodcast.co.uk. So anybody got anything they want to add to this conversation? Also, I need a challenge for next week and a seed to sow and a subject. I did have an idea for a subject. And this is something I'm going to be discussing on the podcast tomorrow, so which may be where it doesn't work. But I'm growing watercress I've made a little outdoor pond and I'm growing watercress in it. And it's got me thinking about edible plants that we could grow in ponds. How was that for a subject? Or is that going to be a little bit too nondescript? Turbo Stream says, my only butternut squash that germinated is growing okay. No flowers yet, though. Yeah, my butternut squash plant, the one that you sent me the challenge, it died. Got eaten by slugs and snails. Cheers, Nigel. Cheers, Digwell. We'll give that a go. Talking about the courgettes. Busy Lizzie's. Sorry, that was it. Busy Lizzie's. I water feed most of my beds with comfrey. Good idea. Yeah, comfrey is fantastic. I use it in the compost bins because it's good as a compost activator and all those nutrients go into the compost. But comfrey for me has to be on every allotment because it is so good. Anne says, Dad used to save all the woody stuff for the bean trench and bash them well before throwing in. It's a good idea. That's a very good idea, actually. Add all those Brussels sprout stalks and even the cabbage stalks or sweet corn stalks. Throw that into the bean trench, add some more material, and off you go. Nigel also says impatience or busy Lizzie. Thank you. I'm never sure when it comes to flowers, in all honesty. I should know more about them, but I'm more a veg gardener, as you know. I have lots of old sweet corn seeds, so I thought I'd use that. I don't need cobs as I'll have a separate bed, but they will be the same variety to stop cross-pollination. And this is over on Instagram. Jenny also says, I chop up sweet corn, brassica, sunflower stems, another one actually, all woody but great material. Also, sometimes dry sunflower stems to use as canes. It's a good idea. I don't grow it anymore, but what was it called? Artichokes, Jerusalem artichokes. And the stems on that, when they dried out, they were great as a fire starter, but they would be good for these bean trenches as well. That's another thing we could throw in there, isn't it? Another good source of compost material. Luckily, we got rid of our artichokes now, which was quite a challenge, but we got rid of them. One thing about it is feeding the plants. I usually add a handful of chicken manure pellets in the planting hole, though. Feed it Friday. That's how I do it. Every Friday is feeding day. That's not to say we feed our plants every week, but feeding Friday is a day that I concentrate on feeding. It makes it simple because that's the one job you have to do on that day. And Friday just works. That's my tip anyway. That's my tip. So challenge for next week, seed for next week, and something else. I could do radish or spring onions as part of the Premier Seeds seed of the month, because I made a massive cock up with that this week. But that could be something we would that would be a good thing. Could be a good seed that we could do next week. Turbo Stream forget to feed Fridays, more like it. Yeah, it happens, but you'll get there in the end. Anne says watercress idea could be a bit of a short discussion. I've always wanted to. Not just watercress, anything else that could grow in a pond. So I've got a few ideas of things that we could do. Watercress is an example, but there's many other things that could potentially grow in a pond or in moving water. And I've got quite a few ideas, actually. I've just thought of two thinking of this subject. What we got? And Anne says, sorry, I've always wanted to try growing watercress. It's yeah. There's somebody actually who works on a watercress farm in the audience, so we might be able to get a few tips from her. Chicken pellets are high in nitrogen, so you may want to use potash feed if the plant has flowering fruit. Yeah. Brian says, I think it's a generous feed of chicken manure pellets that helped grow good collies this year. I've got to get some more chicken manure pellets, actually. Thank you for reminding me that. Goldfish, that can go in a pond. Yep, goldfish can go in a pond. I've got quite a few ideas on this. And you can technically eat goldfish, can't you? I've sown radish, spring onions, lambs, lettuce, rocket, and spinach today. You've been busy, very busy. I just spat my beer out when I read that, talking about goldfish. Grow wabi sabi. Yeah, that one of the others I was thinking of, funnily enough. But I think that might make a good discussion. What edibles can we grow in aquatic areas? I think that would make a good discussion for next week. That's what we're going to talk about. All I need now is a challenge and a seed to sow. Digwell says aquaponics. The fish poo feeds the plants. Indeed, it does. Indeed, it does. I quite like aquaponics. If you can get it off, of course. Tend to use pellets under brassicas, Nigel. I should really sort out a feeding regime. Half the trouble is getting a feeding regime. Anne says, okay, I'm interested, but I'm not eating goldie. Now, I wouldn't eat a goldfish myself, but there was carp is basically goldfish anyway. And there are parts of the world, Eastern European countries, if I'm not mistaken, their Christmas dinner would be a carp. So it's not unheard of at all. Not unheard of at all. Brian's, I can go in a pond if I don't steer this chair right. Ducks, of course. Beddoes, tonight has been a shit show. Who knew there was so much to talk about in manure? Yeah. Thank you for that. Aquatic and bog garden. Yeah, we'll go on along with that. I think that's a good one. Rob is laughing at Beddoes' comment. Indeed. Yeah, so all I need is a challenge, a mission, something you can set me to do over this next week. I am on call next weekend. If it's hot, I'm going to be busy at work. But oh dear. Careful, Richard, with the goldfish. We've not set the challenge yet. Yeah, the trouble is you need a carp of a decent size. Apparently, it tastes quite earthy. Yeah. The Normans introduced carps in moats as food fish. Yeah, exactly. It's not unheard of. It just doesn't sound very appetizing, does it? I sowed Swiss chard, mustard, and beetroot for the leaves this week, and a small pot of lettuce. Excellent. Duck poo, not so easy to use, just water, except on bedding in house. I mean, I think that's where we would use it, the bedding in the house. So yeah, mission and a seed. So I think next week we're going to do radish and spring onion, or radish or spring onion, actually, one or the other, and I'll give it some thought. Probably spring onion, to be honest with you, because I quite like spring onion and I need to sow quite a bit of it. So that'll be what we're sowing next week, spring onions. All I need from you guys is a mission, a challenge, something we can do, something good, something fun. Sorry, I've got to keep those liquids going. Digwell says, I prefer sheets on my bed in the house. Talking about the duck bedding. Challenge, build a vegetable bog garden. I've kind of already done that, so it's not much of a challenge. I've built a vegetable pond. I'll put it like that. I'll put a vegetable pond. I mean, it could be, I could elaborate on it a bit more, but you're going to hear more about that on tomorrow's podcast. So I don't want to get into that too much. But yeah, I'm just coming up with ideas of things that make it a bit more interesting. Yeah, I just need a challenge. Anne says, loving your t-shirt. Yeah, I don't wear this. I love this t-shirt because I thought it was a great t-shirt for this sort of feel. But at the same time, when I'm doing this show, I love being with you guys, and it's sometimes a bit of the wrong thing to say. I love spending time with you guys here. So please don't read into it. It's just a bit of fun. How about entering a vegetable in a local show? Our local show isn't until September, and that's not quite going to work. Kate says, mission idea, testing your soil. We did that a few weeks ago, and I know that because I've still got the testing kit right here. Good one, Kate. Yeah, I done that a few weeks ago, so not really an option. By the way, I'm reading this book at the moment, the Permaculture Living Handbook. Has anybody read it? I've spoke about this on the podcast on Monday briefly. Has anybody read it? And if so, what do you think of it? Mark says, I found with no dig beds, my beds are very dry. Any tips? Are you mulching as well? I mean, the compost does tend to look after it, but are you? What type of soil are you on? Is it free draining, clay soil, anything like that? Don't know about emissions. Seems impossible to think of something. I think everyone's having this trouble today. It could be, as long as it's vegetable garden related, it's got to be something. Digwell, you'll have to make a list of what hasn't been done. We can repeat, but as long we've just got to try and if I can remember it, then it's not worth repeating. As I said, I know we've done the soil test not that long ago. Same here, Mark. Yeah. What type of soil are you on? That's the big question. So far, the challenge that is in the lead is building the vegetable bog garden. But as I said, I've kind of already done that, and it's on the podcast tomorrow. So I'm not really there for that. Stuart Jackson, challenge for next week. Different ways of getting water into your garden, i.e. keeping your garden damp. How's that? How's that for a challenge? How to keep your soil hydrated. How's that for a challenge? Mark says, glad I'm not the only one. Make a veggie curry. Veggie curry. Preparing for the dark nights, garden lighting and security. That'd be one that we could talk about in the future, couldn't it? Veggie curry, good ideas. 2 votes so far for veggie curry or keeping your garden damp. The garden lighting and security, I think, is going to be a discussion that we'll probably do in September. But yeah, veggie curry or keeping the soil moist. What between the two? Vote for it. Vote for it. Say veggie or damp. Veggie or damp in the comments. Whatever gets the most votes will be the choice. Challenge idea: make swales around an in-ground bed. Monitor the results. So I don't know enough about swales, to be honest. That's part of the reason I'm reading this book. I understand the idea of swales, but yeah. Write these down. I you know what? When I finish these, I do write these things down now. I was never an ideas man. I hate curry too. Keeping garden moist, says Rob's. Veggie, Vindaloo. I like my meat. Can you keep that to yourself, please? This is a family show. Happy with a curry idea? Live veggie curry instead of a sew-along. I think the curry idea has it. But I like that muddy boots instead of a sew-along. So do you want to? Should we do both? And instead of sew-along, we do making a veggie curry. I think we'll do that. I think we'll do that. Anne says, I like that muddy boots. Nigel says, a Brummie who don't like curry. And Beddoes, just got a timed water system for the greenhouse. I'll let you know if it works after tomatoes are over and I fit it. Let us know. Good idea to both. Yeah, okay. I think we've got I think we know what we're doing. I suspect most people forget what we're going to do by next week anyway. So please do try and remind or try and remember. I keep meaning to do little reminders as well, but the last few weeks everything's just been a bit manic. I won't get into details because it's not pleasant news, but it's been a bit manic the last couple of weeks, and hopefully we're through the worst of it now. Anyway, right, time to wrap this one up because we are going into overtime. Rob says, I got the telly number for a good takeaway. You can order ready. I'm pretty good at cooking though, but yeah, a veggie curry. We love veggie curries. We love curries in this household. So I would do it, something like that. Pudding, chips and mushy peas sounds better than a curry. Got to go, guys. See you next week. And Nigel says, I need to get you up Balti Triangle. Right. It is time to wrap this one up. Ties in with keeping the ground damp for me, please. Yeah, we're going to do a combination of all these. Anyway, it is time to pack up and get out of here. Time to hopefully cool down and do a bit of gut watering of the garden. We will be back next Sunday at 6. So until then, please take care. Thanks so much, guys.